Hello, welcome back, everyone, to Have You Heard? I'm joined by Lewis Sherfield here, my colleague, sat in the chair to my left.
Yep.
Correct. We're back again for some more topics of conversation around paid media, I guess. For those who haven't met me before, I'm Joey. I'm paid media director here at The Social Shepherd, and this is Lewis. I will let him introduce himself.
I'm Lewis, senior paid media manager, Social Shepherd. Been here for about 6 months, but I've known Joey for a long time. But yeah, happy to be here.
Also LinkedIn expert, which is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So I think, many of the podcasts we've been talking about before, I think LinkedIn has always kind of missed out as the topic of conversation. I think certainly quite a few of the clients that we do work with are done or we work with on an e-commerce basis, where LinkedIn doesn't particularly fit in. But that being said, we do have a proportion of clients that we do work with on a lead gen basis. And certainly from a Google Ads perspective, I think, the activity that we run for those clients is good, fine. I would say very good, actually.
Industry leading
is probably more the term to go for. But I think one of the things that we know with Google is the fact that from a lead gen basis, it's much easier to get higher intent and good quality leads through because of the type of platform. People have, as I just said, a higher intent when they're making those searches. So it's quite easy for us to drive a higher quality of lead off the back end of that. I think the area that we then struggle is trying to maintain that when we're trying to promote across all of the paid social channels, particularly on Facebook and Instagram, where you're being more disruptive in terms of, the content that you're putting out, and certainly in terms of the quality of lead that we typically see come through Meta, it's generally a lot lower.
Yeah, for sure. I think, LinkedIn is an excuse that a lot of people use instead of working. A lot of people spend a lot of time on LinkedIn at work, but it is by all definitions still a social media channel. It's just much better at doing its job for some clients.
Yeah. I think like you mentioned, Lewis, like LinkedIn is, much more and I guess much higher quality platform for us to be able to use from a lead generation perspective. I think certainly with the issues that we've seen, with quality of lead coming through off the back of, Meta, for example, it's a much better platform at us trying to kind of level up that process. Now, we're not saying that there's not optimizations that we can make to that user journey. I think particularly, we can look at introducing things like a longer form to try and qualify the lead more so that, when people don't come, when people do come off the back of say a Meta ad and they're coming onto a landing page, there's not only like 1, 2, 3 fields that they need to fill out before that kind of form is submitted. That's quite easy for people to do, and generally we tend to see quite a lot of spam coming off the back end of that. So I think typically the landing pages that we're using from a paid social perspective generally tend to be quite a lot longer, just so we can qualify that lead much more. That being said, it doesn't exclude everything from the equation, which I guess is where LinkedIn comes into play in terms of really, really generating that higher quality of lead.
Yeah. And LinkedIn is fantastic because given everything and all of the data that's available to you, you're able to get rid of all of that spam immediately. You'll still get some, there's always going to be some, but the quality of traffic is baseline so much better. And then you don't need to resort to making the lead gen form much longer or anything like that, because you know that those people you're reaching are correct.
Yeah, exactly. And then talk to me a little bit more about, I guess, the targeting on LinkedIn, because I think there's so many more layers that we can delve down into in terms of granularity in comparison to what you get on Meta, for example.
Yeah, so I think the main difference between LinkedIn and Meta is it's more of a professional kind of networking platform. I know a lot of people who don't really use it still think of it as like a jobs board or a job searching board, but it's become, especially in the last few years, more of a professional social sort of media kind of networking thing, which people will use whilst they're working, people will use outside of work even, for sort of finding slightly more mature, I guess, content and things like that, and less sort of spammy.
Not mature content,
not 18 plus content, but you know what I mean. Slightly more sort of like informed. I can't even say adult because that also sounds wrong.
Yeah.
But just better content, less. Here's a picture of my baby, and more here's some interesting industry news kind of thing. And as a result of that, people give up more information about what they do. LinkedIn's almost like an online CV for a lot of people. And you can show where you've worked, what your experience is, where you went to university, all of those sort of things, what you're interested in, et cetera, et cetera. And those things aren't necessarily things that people give up so much on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. People aren't really shouting about their job or their promotions or anything like that. They might be, but they're definitely going to be shouting about it on LinkedIn, because you want other potential employers or your professional network to know about your the milestones you've had in your career. And as a result, all of that data is available to you as an advertiser. So for example, I can advertise to someone who I know has 4 years of experience, who works within a certain industry, who has a certain job title, and who went to a certain university, like all of these sort of things. That is like really, really valuable information, which is not available on any other platform. And even if it is available on other platforms, it's really, really sort of fairly rubbish. Like the match rate is not super high. So at least with LinkedIn, if I say I want to reach senior paid media managers in Bath, I'm going to get an ad. Basically, that's pretty much it. So from that respect, it's a really, really good platform to hit professional audiences.
Now, there is a slight counter to that in the fact that it's quite an expensive platform, right?
It is, yeah. But I think that's also a little bit of a myth in some cases. I think it can just take longer to work for you. Mm-hmm. When you launch something on LinkedIn, you'll notice that it is more expensive. And I think ultimately there are less people using it, and they're trying to expand inventory on LinkedIn, but it's quite limited because they want to keep that platform very sort of organic focused, and very sort of professional. And as a result, there's less inventory for you to buy ads on, and which is ultimately going to up the price of LinkedIn. But once it's working, and once you know what works, and once you've analyzed that data, you can get it to be as cheap, if not cheaper, than other platforms. And then I guess also from LinkedIn's point of view, that you're getting super qualified traffic. And if you hone that point home with, your client, or, even if it's for yourself, if you're running it for yourself, you can justify spending more money because that traffic is much higher quality, and you're not going to get any of those spam leads. You're going to get good leads, and you're going to get actual engagement, as opposed to maybe on Facebook where you'll just get rubbish traffic.
Yeah, that's fair. I think as well, the nature of LinkedIn itself, the way that it's built around, lead generation in terms of the ads that you're putting out, they've got a lot more ad formats that are kind of built specifically around that.
Yeah, some of the recent updates they've added, for example, is like document ads. So, for example, if you had an ad on Google or Facebook and you wanted to get someone to download something like a white paper, an ebook, you would have to put that on your website. Whereas on LinkedIn, you can have that all natively within the platform. So you can have someone download a document and fill in their information without having to leave the website, which is amazing because it's difficult to get people to leave a website. And if you can do it all within platform, then yeah, let's do it. And just because it's not like an e-commerce focused thing doesn't mean people's behavior really changes when they're on social media. So things like that, native lead gen ads, things you can interact with without having to leave the platform, is really separating it.
So it all comes back down to user journey at the end of the day, doesn't it? The main thing is that we're always trying to create something that's as frictionless as possible with as few touch points as possible, which I think, again, when you try and do that from a meta perspective, the quality of lead just goes through the floor. But I think certainly with the type of audience and the type of content and just the nature of LinkedIn itself, you're always going to try and, you're always going to be able to kind of maintain that quality, despite the fact that you're kind of making that journey as frictionless as possible.
Yeah. And there are, I guess, learning sort of curves with LinkedIn. People interact differently with things. People are in more of a professional mindset on LinkedIn, so they won't necessarily fill in things, as you said, for example, like e-commerce. They're not interested in that because they're there for a reason, whether they're having an excuse not to work or whether they're there for a genuine reason, but they're still looking for LinkedIn style content, and therefore there is a bit of a learning curve in terms of what works. It's not the same as Meta, for example. It'll be completely different, but once you get that right, the cost is almost like a non-issue because that people are interacting and the quality of traffic is really good.
Nice. So, I mean, the general crux is LinkedIn is good.
Amazing. Let's just everyone buy media on LinkedIn, please.
And if you were to sum everything up with everything that we've discussed today, what would be your 3 key takeaways for running LinkedIn ads?
I think one of the first things would be understanding your audience, and a really good way to do that. I mean, I know that's paid media 101, but like understanding your audience is really crucial on LinkedIn because you don't actually know who is interested, because it's much harder to work it out. You can install the insight tag without running any ads, which is the same as the Meta Pixel. And that will start gathering data about who visits your website. So you can see, what their seniority is, for example, where they live, what their company is, job titles, all of that sort of stuff. And you can build up that data for a really long time before you even start running LinkedIn ads. So you know exactly who's visiting your site, you know exactly where they are, and then you can copy that and build that into your campaign. So I'd say understanding your audience and having a solid foundation is probably the first point.
Cool. Number 2,
probably making use of all of the ad formats that are out there. There are loads. I think there's like 15 different ad formats on LinkedIn, but people are still going to resonate with the kind of ads that they resonate with on sort of like Meta, but the wording needs to be different, and the point needs to be different. So people are still going to like video because it's going to capture your attention, but maybe instead of a video about a product, there's a video about, one of your services you offer or something like that. So making use of video formats. Don't be shy. Don't just use single images because you're trying to sell, something B2B or something like that. You can still be exciting, even if your brand isn't as exciting as, someone who sells shoes, for example. And then number 3, I think it's making sure that you have all the tracking set up right for LinkedIn, because that's one of the hardest things to get right on LinkedIn, because it is slightly different, and making sure you're tracking the right sort of objective for each stage of the funnel. For example, for like Meta, we're looking at like content views. For top of funnel, middle of funnel, we might be looking at interactions or add to carts, and then bottom of funnel, we want people to be purchasing. But for LinkedIn, it's completely different. And if there is a lead gen sort of journey, it might be content views, but the second thing might be downloading a white paper or signing up to a newsletter or something like that. And having that measurability across your LinkedIn, even if that's not your objective, having all of that measurability there helps you map out what that audience is doing. If you have enough traffic, you can then implement that within your campaigns. You can start targeting people who do that, but it's just sort of defining what those conversions are and how they're different from a classic kind of e-commerce journey.
Cool. Amazing. Thanks very much, Lou.
That's all right.
I guess that kind of sums up everything for today from a LinkedIn perspective. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. For those watching on YouTube, obviously give us a like and a subscribe. On any other media outlets, obviously we're on Spotify and Instagram too. Make sure you give us a follow. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.